children are stopped from going to school. The Israelis claim this is necessary for their security. If that's true, it's clearly not working. And the security of Palestinians is almost never mentioned.
You feel all your life that you are humiliated. You don't control yourself. You don't control the air you are breathing. You don't. I don't want to talk about planning for anything. This is something that we don't even dream about. Plan to next hour or next day what we will do. This is something we don't even dream about because our destiny is not in our hands. It's in the hands of the others who decide how we will live, how we will get married. To come and live with my husband in this country, I had to take the permission of the Israelis. It's not enough that they took our land and they are not allowing us to have our own state, but also they are controlling every detail in our life.
Some Israelis have spoken out. More than 500 soldiers have refused to serve in the occupied territories. We are, they've said, like the Chinese student who stood in front of the tank in Tiananmen Square. We are the conscience of our country. Ishai Rosensvee is one of them.
I really think the real story of the occupation is there in the checkpoints. I cannot forget this kind of picture, 5 in the morning, 4:45 in the morning, a line of hundreds of people waiting, to pass in the checkpoint, and you're standing there, and you see their eyes, the humiliation, the frustration, the hatred. Them, you are the occupation. You have all the power. They have no power. You can at every second take their ID, and then they are, they have nothing, because without identification, you can, every soldier can arrest them. You are the man that stand there, keep them without rights, without freedom.
The world often sees the issue of Palestine through the tragedy and horror of suicide bombings, an expression of despair by powerless people against an oppressor armed with modern weapons. The first female suicide bomber struck in January 2002. Her name was Wafa Idris, the only daughter of a family of refugees who were driven out of their home near Tel Aviv. She was 28, an ambulance volunteer.
وبعدين علاقة صداقة كانت موجودة بينه وبينها. اللي حصل إنه وفاء قامت في عملية كانت مفاجأة إلنا.
What makes an ambulance volunteer, a carer, become a suicide bomber?
طبعا كانت تيجي على البيت تحكي لنا انه اليوم في واحد استشهد، طبعا نزل مخه على الارض، مصارينه كانوا طلعات، اجره كانت طالعه من محلها. طبعا هاي نوع اثر عليها. بعض الحالات حتى اللي بيكون بعض الفتيات بتكون حوامل بدها تولد، طبعا تولد على الحاجز، يموت الطفل تبعها على الحاجز. صوبت 3 مرات في رصاص المطاط. هذا انا بتوقع انه هذا يكون دافع قوي انها تنتقم لابناء شعبها.
The suicide bombs are presented to the Israeli public as an insane act by an insane people with whom there is no chance for peace, instead of putting a wider analysis which would say there is a way out of the suicide bombs. While everybody condemns them, and rightly so, there is a way out of it. And the way out of it is to provide the circumstances in which these young people would find avenues of hope instead of avenues of despair. There is, I would say, an orchestrated campaign to silence that kind of analysis inside Israel.
Suicide attacks against civilians are clearly crimes, and they are used by extremists. But the extremists rely on the brutality of the occupation and the despair of their young volunteers, some extraordinary Israelis are brave enough to recognize this. Rami El-Hanan is one Israeli father who knows about suicide bombing. On September the 4th, 1997, his daughter Shmada was killed by one. She was 14 years old.
She was a child of peace. She was full of life, very laughing girl, very good student, dancing, everything that little girls do. It was the first day of school and she was going down the Ben Yehuda Street, which is some kind of a mall, to buy some books for the new year with two girlfriends of hers. One of them, Sivan Zaga, died with her, and the other, Daniela Birman, was very, very severely wounded.
Rami is a graphic designer and a former soldier. His father survived Auschwitz. His grandparents, 6 aunts and uncles perished in the Holocaust.
How do you distinguish the feelings of anger that any father would have felt at losing your daughter in such circumstances?
I'm not crazy. I don't forget. I don't forgive. Someone who murders little girls, anyone who murders little girls, is a criminal and should be punished. But if you think from the head and not from the guts, and you look what made people do what they do, people that don't have hope, people who are desperate enough to commit suicide, you have to ask yourself, have you contributed in any way for this despair, for this craziness? It hasn't come out of the blue. The boy that his mother was humiliated in the morning at the checkpoint will commit suicide in the evening. The suicide bomber was a victim the same as my girl was. Of that I'm sure. You have to understand where these suicide bombers come from. Understanding is part of the way to solving the problem.
Few people have been betrayed so often as the Palestinians. Before the Second World War, the British ran Palestine as a mandate. They had promised the Palestinians an independent state, but they also promised Palestine to the Jewish movement known as Zionism. In 1948, when the State of Israel was founded, the Arab world revolted as Palestinians were expelled from their homes or forced to flee in a blitz of fear and terror. 750,000 people became refugees. Israel's military hero, General Moshe Dayan, later admitted, Jewish places were built in the place of Arab villages. There is not one single place in the country that did not have a former Arab population. While Palestinians were denied the right to return to their homes, anybody who could prove they were Jewish had the right to settle in Israel. In 1967, Palestinians once again fled their homes during the Six-Day War when Israel occupied the remaining 22% of Palestine, describing this as an act of self-defense. To the Palestinians, it seems that Israel's colonizing never stops. This looks like a medieval fortress. The Israelis call it a Jewish settlement. In fact, it's part of a network of armed colonies that, by one estimate, effectively control 42% of the occupied West Bank. Many of them dominate and intimidate Palestinian communities. They are illegal under international law and have been condemned by the United Nations.
When I came to West Bank and saw all these settlements, Israeli settlements, on the tops of the hills, surrounding all the cities, so you feel that they are over you, they are superior. And you are the ant, the insect down, you know? And you know, this is your land, it's nobody else's land, this is our land. But still, they are the ones who are on the tops, and they have all the weapons, and they control also everything in the West Bank.
This is Moshe Dan. He's taking me to a Jewish settlement in the south of the country, in Palestinian Gaza.
שלום. שלום. אני מדריך שלהם. תן לי בבקשה את הקשר.
I see here, this is all electrified fence along here, isn't it? Electrified.